presentation. So to get us started, I'm going to go ahead and share a PowerPoint presentation. What is the purpose of religion? Should it stay in the realm of piety or should it extend into politics? I can't possibly answer this question in 6 minutes. However, I do want to talk about one man who saw how religion could bring freedom to the poor. Hello, class. My name is Ella Ferenzi, and today I would like to talk about Oscar Romero, Archbishop of San Salvador and believer of liberation theology. So for this assignment, I watched the biopic Romero, which is a, telling of the life of this archbishop. So in this film, Oscar Romero is elevated to this position during the 1977 El Salvadoran election. And it's at this time that his eyes are really open to the corruption and violence of his country. So in the beginning of this film, we get the idea that he's this very bookish, very quiet, very non-confrontational leader within the church. And that combined with his close connections to the rich are what get him elected. Specifically, they just wanted him, whoever the archbishop was, to be non-polarizing and controllable. However, we're about to find out that this did not work out for them. So there are two important connections within this film that I'd like to mention. So one is with Father Grande, who is another member of the church and a close friend of his, who pretty much tries to open his eyes to the corruption of the government and the struggles of the poor. And the other is Arista Zalata. So that is an upper class friend of his, and pretty much his connection to the rich and to his past of being very oblivious and very, turning the cheek to the suffering of the poor. So once his friend Rutilio is assassinated by the government, Romero's eyes are very, very much open to the suffering of the poor, and he begins to advocate on their behalf and essentially for the importance that religion plays in liberating these people and giving them the freedom that, they deserve within their country. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation again. All right, so that was kind of a summary of the film, but now I want to present a thesis. So in this presentation, I will be discussing how the film uses the themes of liberation theology, the sacred act of communion, and American meddling in the anti-communist fight to connect the Archbishop's role in the liberation of the poor and the historical perspective of poor Salvadorans during the anti-communist era of Latin American politics that essentially became a revolution against the poor. So first, I would like to talk about the sacred act of communion. So in this movie, as people are gathered and they're just celebrating communion, the military shows up and starts firing randomly into the crowd because they feel threatened by, just people gathering together for long periods of time. They see it as a threat, maybe, this communist threat, when it's really just people gathered for communion. So on to the second theme, American involvement. So you can see an American here who's been sent to fight, against communism, but instead is destroying the Eucharist and, things within the church. He's firing at it for, no reason at all. And so this kind of connects back to Romero's fight of, anti-communism versus against the church, and how the line becomes very blurred between the government's fight against communism and their fight against anything that opposes them at all, the poor, the church, anything. And so the third theme is liberation theology. So that's the definition right there. But essentially, this film is big on this theme and just emphasizing the importance of the church and what Romero saw as the importance of the church in fighting against, government corruption and trying to liberate the poor people, seeing that as how people are going to obtain salvation. So I'm going to go ahead and end this slideshow and then just talk about those three themes. So this connects to a lot of what we've discussed in class, especially, back, if we remember back to the tattooed soldier. And there's a lot of themes that kind of correlate. The American involvement is the same as Guillermo's. Remember when he went to Fort Bragg, and when he was fighting um, against anti-communists, he saw them as anti-communists when they were really just the poor trying to fight for their own liberation, fight for their own freedom. So um, that's definitely one way that the themes connect. And then additionally, um, just the sacred act of communion, and seeing how church really kind of gets, hurt in this fight that's supposed to be against communism, but really becomes against the poor, against the church, against anyone at all who stands up against this government, even though it is itself a corrupt government. So those are really the big themes of the movie. And then also a big theme in the 1970s, in this fight for liberation of the poor, and how it became confused by the government in this fight for uh, against communism. So in conclusion, Romero's fight to end the violence of the government reflects the story of many El Salvadorans. He was not radical, he was not a guerrilla or a communist. He simply wanted people to live by the beliefs of peace and freedom, justice and dignity, just as it says at the end of the film, and just as people were fighting for throughout this time. That is all for my presentation. Thank you very much for watching.